the local tourney and get matched with my dame. Just one more goat bounce and I've got the game. Then on her turn she plays Shift Donald Duck. Gosh, it seems that I've run out of luck.
Come on now, let's play some Lorcana. With such a sugar rush, it's a nirvana. We'll rip a booster pack or four, start food fights and roast a smorgasbord of Lord Smorcana.
Hello everyone, welcome to another lovely episode of Smorcana.
I'm Brett.
And I am Katie. We are here in the beautiful Smorcana Cafe on this blustery, cloudy, clammy morning.
I love days like this.
Yeah, you do. This is your kind of stuff.
I love it. I think I feel less guilty about being inside and playing Lorcana all day.
I think that's a really fair point.
You know, when it's really nice out and it's the summertime, you can go to the beach or you can go on a hike or whatever. But when it's kind of damp and cloudy all day, all you can do is be inside playing games.
That's a good point. Lorcana's not really an outdoor kind of a sport. I think I really like sunny, perfect days, but I think I also imagine being able to play Lorcana outside, and you really can't.
I'd love to invent some kind of playmat, like a magnetic playmat with matching sleeves, so that you could attach your cards to the mat, you know? So then you could pick them up and they wouldn't blow away.
That's an amazing idea.
Somebody probably already did that.
I don't think so. And maybe we shouldn't even put this in the episode. That's such a good idea.
Well, listen, if you have the resources out there to make magnetic playmats and matching sleeves, then let's talk about a patent.
I think that's a really good idea. Wow. Okay. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while now.
What's going on with us and the world of Lorcana?
Oh, so much. We are watching the DLC right now. There's a couple DLCs happening this weekend. It's a very exciting weekend on Lorcana Twitch.
Really excited to dive into some of that for our main course, potentially. Talk about the meta.
Yes. In other news, though, our Lorcana League came to an end.
It did. Our Shimmering Skies League has ended and our attention's now turned towards set championships. How did League end up for you?
League ended pretty well for me. I got 5th overall, which was really fun. I unfortunately was not able to participate in the tournament at the end of League, but I did come by and hang out and have some snacks and get to watch some games, which was a lot of fun.
Well, you were at a parent-teacher night, right, at school, and you texted me as soon as you got out, and you said, did anybody bring snacks to the tournament? And you showed up half an hour later with a huge bag full of candy corn and cookies and all kinds of goodies.
Yeah, you gotta have snacks here at the end of League, and it is our duty as Smorcana to provide those snacks. I expected no less. It's the burden that we bear in life, and I could not imagine a better burden.
It's a delicious burden.
I love bringing snacks to people. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's always been my favorite thing to do. Nothing feels better than giving someone something to eat. How'd you do in League?
Well, I fared pretty well in the last tournament. I finished 2nd in league points over the course of the league to Rob, who had a ton of points on the bingo card for all the achievements that we can get in league. And so he did a great job and managed to take down 1st place. And then in the tournament, I went undefeated and I managed to take it down. I got 1st place.
Yeah, you did. You got 1st place. Come on. That's awesome.
Yeah, you know, I got really lucky with trades and pulls and things. I had a plan going into the early weeks of the league to play what I thought were the best colors in the set for uncommons and commons. I thought, and I still think, that Amethyst is the strongest color for commons and uncommons this set. You have Bruni and the Library, and Finders Keepers is a nice draw option if you're lacking other ones. There's just a lot of really good commons and uncommons for Amethyst. And then Sapphire also, I thought, had some really cool commons and uncommons. You've got Tipo and Donald so that you can do some ramping. And then if you manage to get your hands on the rare Scrooge McDuck, just the line of playing Tipo on turn 2 and Scrooge McDuck on turn 3 is so strong. I mean, I feel like that's a strong line in Constructed even. And to see it available in this kind of more limited format, I really wanted to take advantage of it.
That's awesome. And I think you're being a bit modest here when you say it was all luck and it's just the cards I got and blah, 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 blah. A lot of people had really good cards. It also comes down to skill, too. So you should be proud of that. You should be happy with how you did. I think it's awesome.
I'm not displeased. I think I made a good deck. I played it reasonably well. I also had Mufasa, so part of it is just luck that we pulled a bunch of Mufasas and I happened to be playing Sapphire.
Sure. I'm not, there are a lot of great players in our league, but you also built a really good deck and you should be happy. I'm happy. I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Even if you're going to keep being modest, I'm proud of you. What else happened to us at League, Brett? We had a very exciting pull.
Yeah, so I won a bunch of packs for winning that tournament. And we were usually kind of take our packs home and open them slowly later and kind of try to take them in and enjoy the art and whatever. And that night we decided to open one pack in the store. We were going to stick around and play some constructed games after the tournament ended. So we opened one pack and we were kind of flipping them one at a time from being upside down to right side up. And I flipped the last card and it was an enchanted Clarabelle.
Whoa.
And I think I made a noise like, "Whoa!" Yeah, I just made you jump right now, which is how everybody reacted in the store.
Yes,
too.
yes.
People were like, "What happened? What's wrong?" I think I made a cat. I think I made a sound like a cat that got stepped on.
Yes, it was very alarming.
I was excited.
But it was awesome. It was so good.
Not expecting it.
Yeah, it was so great. We hadn't pulled an enchanted in a long time. And a Clarabelle enchanted, no less. That's awesome.
She is one hot cow.
She sure is. She's a hot ticket.
Yeah. We also won some pins, and these were duplicate pins. We were able to kind of distribute some of our league winnings around to folks who had been looking for stuff. But we did hang on to a few extra pins, and so be on the lookout for a giveaway in the very near future.
Yes, we love a good giveaway. We do. So there will certainly be one coming down the pipeline. It's the first thing we talk about whenever we get prizes like that. We go, ooh, giveaway. Ooh, giveaway.
What else is going on in Lorcana?
We've gotten some spoilers.
Yeah.
For the Azurite Sea coming up.
Pirate Wendy looks quite cool.
I am such a fan of all of the Wendys that have been Lorcana, and I feel like a lot of them haven't stuck. But I really like her. I like Captain Wendy so much. She's so cool.
Yeah, she's a pretty good card, and she finds her way into some lists sometimes. I think she's waiting for that Floodborn Wendy to really kick off.
Most definitely.
But this Dreamborn Pirate Wendy that's coming synergizes with other pirates. That's going to be pretty cool.
Yep, love to see that.
We also got another team-up card.
Ooh!
Chip and Dale.
Chip and Dale.
Rescue Rangers.
Chip and Dale.
So Chip and Dale, it's another team-up card. It's a Floodborn team-up card, so you can shift them onto a Chip or a Dale. And they have really cool text where every single time you put a card into your inkwell, you can retrieve a character from your discard pile and put it in your hand.
Awesome.
Very, very cool. Little note, we first saw this revealed in French, and I was not aware that Chip and Dale in France are known as tic et tac.
I did not know that until this moment.
Tick and tack.
That's so funny.
Isn't
Tic-tac.
that so cute?
I love that.
Yeah, tic and tack.
I think I'd rather have them be Chip and Dale, but tic-tac is cute too. What's going on with our set championships world? We're getting right into that season of every weekend there's a set champ somewhere.
Yeah, all of October, every weekend, there are set championships. Now, the final weekend, we're going to be in Seattle. So we have 3 weekends of set championships to attend. We are currently signed up for 3 of them, and we're looking to maybe add 1 or 2 more to that schedule. So we're going to be super busy with set championships.
Oh, yeah. Set champ here, a set champ there, a set champ everywhere.
Would love to get my hands on one of those enchanted Mirabelles, because that is really cool.
Yeah, and we love Encanto in this family, so that would be a great addition to the collection.
Well, that's the update. What do we have planned for this evening's repast?
We are going to be giving some tips for one of the most important phases in a Lorcana game.
Then for our main course, we're going to be on the hunt for what to cook up for set championships. What's the meta looking like? We'll have a dream card, and then we'll send you on your way.
Yeah, really nice, delightful menu for today's time at the Smorcana Cafe.
Bonsoir, madame et monsieur. Comment ça va?
Oh, we're very well. Thank you so much, Francois.
It is very good to see you. I apologize for being away last week. We're on our vacation, vacances.
Oh, were you, with Helga?
I had some delightful company on the trip, yes. We had a very good time. I will not say anymore for the honor of my coworker.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to pry.
For this evening's appetizer, we have some specialty steak tips from Mulligan's Steakhouse. These are very fine quality meats, original delicacy. Bon appetit.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow.
Oh, look at these.
Look at these steak tips.
Mulligan steak tips.
Oh.
Did you know that steak tips are like a regional thing?
Are they really?
Yeah, they're like a New England specific thing. You don't get
What?
steak tips everywhere, from what I understand.
No way.
I think so.
Dear listener, tell us if we're crazy about this.
Maybe I just made that up.
I don't think you made it up. You're not one to make things up. That's crazy.
Well, if you haven't had steak tips, it's a particular cut of meat. They're kind of like an end cut of a sirloin, and they tend to be like pretty lean. Like they can be tough if you don't marinate them. Like usually you want to marinate those in a good sauce to start like breaking them down a little bit, and then you can throw them on the grill, but they're delicious. Love steak tips.
Yeah, steak tips are incredible. Wow. Okay, if you've never had steak tips, I am so sorry for your loss. You don't know what you're missing. So, we're talking about the mulligan here. Mulligan is so important. You have got a lot of wisdom when it comes to how to mulligan properly in Lorcana. I know it's something that exists in a lot of other card games as well. What is a mulligan? What are we talking about here?
So, your mulligan, your hand alteration at the very start of a game in Lorcana, is relatively powerful. So in a lot of card games, when you draw your opening hand, you have the ability to either keep that hand or throw your entire hand back and draw a new one once. So you don't have that same power to cultivate a really strong opening hand. Usually it's that binary yes or no. So the fact that Lorcana has that individual card selection in your initial alteration of your hand means that you can get really, really consistent openings. At the start of games, you can often plan to have that really smooth first few turns, and that is not the case in a lot of other games. Usually there's either that, again, you throw your whole hand back, or sometimes there are penalties. Like, I believe in Magic, if you throw your whole hand back, you draw fewer cards the next time. So like if you start with 8 cards, and you mulligan, you get 7 cards on your second draw. So there are penalties for using that mulligan ability. So in Lorcana, there's no penalty. You can keep only the cards that you want to see, and that means that you get extremely consistent games. I think of a game like the Lord of the Rings card game that I've mentioned a couple of times.
Sure.
There is a character, a hero character, meaning like he starts in play, basically. You can build your entire deck around the ability to mulligan like Lorcana. Like that's his only ability. So that shows you how strong it is. In that game, usually it's either you keep your hand or you throw it away. And this one particular card says, oh, you get to mulligan like Lorcana. This is the only benefit of using this character. So that goes to show you how strong the mulligan is in Lorcana.
Wow, so we are very fortunate here in Lorcana to have the kind of mulligan power that we have, which is why it's probably all the more important that we know how to mulligan properly so that you can get the full benefit of that benefit.
Absolutely. There are so many games won and lost in the mulligan phase of the game, in that hand alteration phase.
I mean, speaking of win or lose, is there one particular card? Like, is it possible for there to be one card, if you get it in your mulligan, you will win the game?
Sure, and in fact, I think that's the first tip that we have for your mulligans.
Tip number 1.
The first thing I like to ask myself, and again, I do want to say that this is, this is just my opinion, and these are tips that seem to work well for us, but it's certainly not the end all and be all, and all of this is contextual. But the first thing that I like to ask myself in any given mulligan situation is if there is a card that will win me the game if I have it. So an obvious one to me is, do you have ramp on turn 2 as Ruby Sapphire? You are so much less likely to win the game if you miss out on that ramp. Meaning, if you don't have TPO or one jump ahead in those kind of conventionally built Ruby Sapphire lists, you're going to have a much worse time, a much harder time winning that game. If you do have that ramp, you want to keep it. If you don't, you want to find it, right? So that's just the baseline, my first litmus test for making decisions in the mulligan. Will a card win me this matchup? So another example might be Lyle Tiberius Rourke against aggro. He's such an important part of that matchup. He can help you so much. So that's a card that even though he's uninkable and even though he's niche, if you are going against aggro, he can win you the game by himself. And so he's a potential keep for sure.
Wow.
Another example might be the Diablo shift line.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Diablo tends to start and finish a lot of games.
Yeah, if you have an action to discard, you have the 1-drop Diablo and you have the Floodborn Diablo, as well as maybe a payoff like Let the Storm Rage On. You want to keep all of that, right? Because it's maybe the strongest thing you can do on the second turn of the game in Lorcana in most situations. So that's an easy one of like, that will win me the game and therefore I keep it. And it's not always so easy to figure out what those keeps are. So an example might be keeping a Merlin Rabbit if you are playing red-purple in a mirror.
Sure.
And that comes from knowledge of your matchups and practice and figuring out what those most important cards are. You might learn eventually that, wow, if I don't have a rabbit as red-purple in this mirror match, I will lose the game. And so therefore I need to keep this rabbit.
Right.
Even though it's a 4-cost uninkable, and that might seem a little counterintuitive.
It's a card that you're going to be hunting for, and if you already have it in your hand, that's a good thing to keep in your hand instead of shuffling it back in your deck. Makes a lot of sense.
And so much of these are matchup dependent, like keeping Cogsworth as Sapphire Steel. If you're facing a Ruby deck that can easily remove your Cogsworths with Tremaines and Be Prepared, then you don't want to keep that card. But if you know you're going against Steel Song or you're in a mirror match, Cogsworth is the best card you can possibly play. So figuring out what are the most important cards and targeting those in your mulligans is definitely the first tip.
Nice. All right, what's tip number 2? So now I'm looking to see if I want the card that's going to win me the game. What's tip number 2?
So then I ask myself if I will definitely play a card in the first 3 turns. That I know it's my best possible play on turns 1, 2, or 3. I will usually keep that card.
Wow. Okay, and this is just like you could keep any 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop to play 1, 2, 3.
Not necessarily. So I wouldn't keep cards that are fine plays, but not my best plays.
Mm-hmm.
So say I know I'm trying to be very aggressive and I have a 1-drop Clarabelle in my hand, but I am also running Cursed Merfolk.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily keep that Clarabelle knowing it's just a fine play if I know that Cursed Merfolk gives me the best chance of winning the game and I don't have a Cursed Merfolk.
Right, you want a mulligan to see if you get that.
Right. I wouldn't keep Ursula Deceiver against Ruby Amethyst. On turn 2, Ursula Deceiver is a fine play against Ruby Amethyst. Maybe you hit Friends on the other side. Maybe you hit Be Prepared, early. But most likely you're going to have a stronger play that has a little bit more presence on the board against Ruby Amethyst. And again, this is all contextual. This is not always true. But I tend to not keep plays that are just okay. And I try to keep things that are definitely my best plays on turns 1, 2, and 3.
That makes a lot of sense. Don't settle for second best.
It's also when you want to start considering being on the play versus being on the draw. Things change a lot if you're going first or second. An example that's come up recently for me is having both Kit Cloud Kicker, the 3-cost Emerald card, and Clarabelle, the 3-cost Clarabelle that draws you a card if your opponent has more cards than you.
Right.
Now, both of those are Emerald cards that you play on turn 3. But Kit is much better going second, and Clarabelle is much better going first. So Clarabelle is often a fantastic play on turn 3 going first because most likely your opponent is still going to have more cards in their hand than you. And that's not going to be true if you're going second. Similarly, if your opponent plays a 3-cost character, there's a high likelihood that that character is going to have 2 or less strength. And then your kit gets more value when you play it on your turn 3 going second.
Right, okay.
So when I talk about I keep the cards that are best to play on turns 1, 2, and 3, that information changes a lot depending on if you're going first or second.
And I would imagine it changes depending on if you know what your matchup is.
Sure, yeah. Without that knowledge about what your opponent is playing, you won't necessarily know which cards will win you the game, or you might not know what cards are the best to play on turns 1, 2, and 3. And in that case, that's when I kind of hedge towards meta knowledge. Like, if I know there's a ton of Steel Song, then I will keep that Ursula in my hand because that's most likely going to be the best thing I can do on turn 2.
All right, that's great. We've got a couple of tips under our belt. What's another tip for mulliganing? Tip number 3. Boo.
So I want to talk about, for tip number 3, when you should keep cards that you're only going to ink.
Okay. I think about this one a lot, especially when I'm mulliganing. I try to keep things that I can ink.
I think that this is generally overdone amongst players. I think too often players will keep cards that they're only going to ink. Now, there are some caveats to this because I do think there are scenarios in which you do want to keep a card that you are only going to ink. So I am, for instance, more likely to keep an inkable card if I have a generally high uninkable count in my deck. So if I'm playing Steel Song and I have 19 uninkable cards in my deck, then I don't want to throw away that Cinderella Stout-Hearted perhaps because it is the right thing to ink on turn 1. I also will keep ink if I already have plays for turns 1, 2, and 3. If I'm already lining up a whole bunch of cards that I know I'm going to play that are my best plays, that is when I start considering keeping cards to ink. Because if I have to ink my really great turn 3 play because I drew back into a couple of uninkables, then that really hurts my chances of winning the game, right? So in that case, I will have wished that I just had any inkable card. I'm also more likely to keep ink if I'm keeping other uninkable cards to play. So if I'm playing an aggressive Emerald deck and I really want to play Cursed Merfolk on turn 1 and Bonsai, the 3/2 that quests for 2, on turn 2, then I'm more likely to keep an inkable card in my hand because Cursed Merfolk and Bonsai are both uninkable. I found this tip, I can't remember where I found it, but a nice rule of thumb, and I don't think this is always true, but I think it's something that's helpful to think about. For every uninkable card that I keep in my opening hand, I try to make sure I have one card that I know I'm going to ink.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's a fair decision-making process, I guess, right? Like you were saying, if you have a big deck of a bunch of uninkables, that you're trying to pay for those uninkables that you want to play.
Exactly. So if I'm keeping that Cursed Merfolk and that Bonsai, and they're both uninkable, I'll then keep the Beast Tragic Hero and the Tinkerbell. That will be my ink for my first couple of turns.
Wow, okay, great. What's tip number 4?
So this is about how aggressive you should be with your mulligans.
Be aggressive. Be aggressive.
So I think in general, if you need a card to win, you need to find that card. If you are playing against Steel Song and you're Emerald and you know you need Ursula Deceiver to win the game, then you have to find that card. You can't afford to keep middling or decent turn 2 and turn 3 plays if you don't have that Ursula already, because that's going to be the card that wins you that matchup. In general, be aggressive with your mulligans, is this last tip here. If you are playing against a tough matchup in particular, I like to roll the dice. If I know that I need a very specific line of cards to win a matchup, I want to find those cards at all costs. I know that the way that I can win that tough matchup is to find those specific cards. Like, for instance, a good one in the current meta is Steel Song against Ruby Sapphire. Steel Song has a really tough time against Ruby Sapphire, generally speaking. When the game starts to go long, Steel Song can't remove those huge characters. All of their removal is kind of wasted. It's just a really poor matchup. However, if Steel Song plays extremely aggressively, with maybe multiple Daisies and Smees and Lawrences, and you're questing for 2 with a whole bunch of characters early, that can be one of the ways you win the game. In those instances, cards like Cinderella Ballroom Sensation and Ursula Vanessa, that are these great singers and will help you in a lot of other matchups, aren't very strong. So aggressively hunt for the cards that will keep you in those difficult matchups.
That makes a lot of sense. And by roll the dice, you don't literally mean roll the dice. You mean mulligan aggressively to get those cards.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really great.
Similarly, and say you're playing an aggressive deck. right? Let's say Amethyst, Amber, Hyper Aggro. You're trying to go really, really fast. Your opening turns are even more important. You need to be even more aggressive. Let's say you're going second as one of those Hyper Aggro decks. And that's already hard because you're much better when you're going first with that deck. And in your mulligan, you end up with Befuddle and Bodyguard Simba for turn 2, and then Bodyguard Donald Duck Musketeer for turn 3. Now that is a turn 1, 2, and 3 play. You can Befuddle their 1-drop, and then you can play Simba, and then you can buff your Simba with Donald Duck and quest for 2 with it. That seems like an okay line. You're playing something on turns 1, 2, and 3. But you're going to lose that game if you play those 3 cards in that order. That's simply not strong enough to win the game when you're going second with that deck. So be more aggressive, I'd say, in general. Don't be afraid to take those chances and go for the cards that will win you the game. I'd say that on average, I keep about 3 cards.
Wow.
Which it seems low, I think for a lot of people.
That's way lower than I would have thought it would be.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of the time I'm keeping 2 or 1, and it's just those few times where you hit the exact right hand and you keep 6 or 7 that kind of balances things out. I'd say most of the time I'm keeping 2 cards.
Wow, that's really great. I enjoyed these delicious steak tips. I think that mulliganing is something that I sometimes struggle with. I can durdle on it a little bit. I'm not quite sure what I want to do, and sometimes I just make decisions based on what I want to play and maybe not necessarily what's best for me or the matchup or the deck. So this is really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's the part of the game that maybe gets overlooked because it's a very small portion of the game in terms of the time you spend playing it overall, right? You know, it takes less time than a single round, but it has such an outsized impact on the outcome of the game that it's important to get those right. And something that you can do is go on to Dreamborn and load your deck, and there's a function where you can draw sample opening hands, and then you can see which cards you would keep and not keep. So you can practice your mulligans. It's called goldfishing in TCG terms.
Huh. That's really cool. I never heard of goldfishing before.
Yeah, so just give that a shot. Try practicing that, and that can help your game quite a bit.
All right. Sounds good.
Bonsoir, madame. I apologize for the delay with your entree. We are having a bit of trouble. You see, we have hired a new chef, and they're having trouble deciding how to prepare a dish. There will be a small delay as he tries to puzzle through the evening's menu.
Oh, no. That's all right, Francois. That's not a problem. Does he need, tips?
We are solving this internally. I'm sure we will be okay. We will find out how to prepare the dish. We are just waiting on... there it is. We have a cookbook being delivered by this courier right now.
Oh my god, wait a minute. That's no ordinary courier.
We know that guy. It's Pete.
Wow, Pete with his giant cookbook about the meta.
Look at the size of that book. That is a huge meta cookbook you've got there, Pete. Good to see you.
Oh, I didn't expect to see you guys today. I was just bringing this by the store to let them peruse some new lists we have.
Well, we're so glad that you're here. Do you know what's in that book? I mean, you seem to know everything about the meta and everything that's going on. We'd love to see what's inside that cookbook.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I helped compile the list, so I mean, I know what's in this cookbook. Do you want to take a look at some of the highlights of it first?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. We're so happy to have you here to enlighten us and to help us ascertain the state of the meta as set championship season approaches. So I guess what we want to know first is this an open meta or is it a solved meta? Do we know what the best deck is, or are there still things being figured out?
I would say that things are still being figured out. That's for a few reasons. One, we're pretty early on. These are 2 of the most major events so far in Set 5. The cookbook is showing that we have a whole bunch of different lists making it through, both to day 2 and just in the room in general. there's going to be a lot of things still changing and still developing.
Awesome. And so as you're looking at all of these lists, is it pretty diverse, or is it kind of concentrated into, 3 or 4 lists, or are there multiple color combinations that have a chance in a DLC?
So I think that there's a pretty clear top grouping. A few lists are very good. Those lists remain to be Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, and Amethyst Ruby. Those make up a bulk of the players that are at Vegas this weekend. And those lists, have been around for a long time. They are still staples. They're still strong. Some of them are seeing innovations with set 5 cards. Some of them are seeing almost no set 5 cards, but finding good footing in new lists that are trying to battle into the forefront.
Awesome. So what do you say we drill down into this? Do you want to kind of put these together in terms of a tier list maybe and go through each color combination and see if we can work through what some of the developments have been?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to start with just kind of going over the data right now of the full room breakdown of what decks were at the Vegas DLC this weekend. So warning, there's going to be a lot of numbers, so maybe get some pens ready.
That's okay. We'll get prepared. We have our calculators at the ready.
Like any good cookbook, there are lots of measurements.
Yes, measurements. That's right. So to start it off, we have Ruby Sapphire commanding a 22% share of the room. Now, this is 1,889 registered players at Vegas. 416 of them brought Ruby Sapphire. Now, there's a lot of variance in that list. There's people who are on Sisu and Ice Blocks. There are people who are now on Donald Duck as a ramping tool.
Woo!
So yeah, give the duck 9 butt, right?
Give the duck 9 butt.
Next up, we have Amber Steel coming at 20%. So this is, off the heels of everybody being excited about Daisy and Prince Naveen. So that makes sense that it's a big showing. Next is our staple Ruby Amethyst. It's not a cycle of a new meta if people aren't going, Ruby Amethyst is dead, and then everybody's winning with Ruby Amethyst still.
The cockroach of Lorcana.
Yes.
Continues bouncing back to life, yes.
And they just barely missed a 20% share at 18%. So those 3 decks make up a huge portion of the room.
Almost 2/3 of the room is those 3 decks.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I would put them in tier 1 or A, whatever, however we want to classify it.
Okay.
Next are probably the ones who are trying to break through. And you'll notice a theme with the next 3. So first we have Amethyst Emerald at 7%, Emerald Steel at 6%, and then Amber Emerald at 6%. Did you catch the common factor in those?
I believe it's Emerald.
Yeah. A lot of the Emerald tools are pretty standard. They haven't really changed much. It's more about what is happening around it. And with Steel Song, getting so important, Ursula Deceiver ripping songs away, very strong. The new Anna legendary card from set 5, very strong. So we're seeing a lot of different people testing out what is the best pairing with Emerald to break into it. Some people like to play with Speed from Amethyst. Some people like to play with the removal from Steel. And then people like me like to make everyone else miserable with the discard aspect in Amber.
Still a strong deck and still one that continues to vex me, I think.
And then rounding it out, we have what are classified as hyper aggro lists in Amber Amethyst. And then we have Sapphire Steel at 3% and Amethyst Steel at 3%. And I think this is one of the more surprising shares of the weekend, is seeing these 2 steel lists at such a low percentage share.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as we go into each of these decks, because there were some tools that made me really excited to try those color combinations. I'm just thinking of like Pete in Amethyst Steel.
Yeah.
Is such a strong card, and one that you would think would enable that archetype to take a step forward, and it seems like that's maybe not happening in this metagame at the moment. Great. So we have that kind of first impression of the meta from these DLCs, giving us our first major set of takeaways, I think, from the Shimmering Skies metagame. Let's go back to the top of the charts here. Let's talk about each of these lists and maybe some of their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so you said that Steel Song and Ruby Sapphire are right at the top of the metagame, yeah?
Yeah, I would say that if you're going to bring a list, you need to be able to beat one of those 2 or both of them if you want to find success. If you are losing to one of them over and over, I don't think your list is going to be there. So you got to be able to hang with the big dogs, and those are currently the 2 big dogs.
How do those two decks match up against each other?
Well, normally, in the past, Steelsong has struggled pretty horribly into Ruby Sapphire. The idea of Ruby Sapphire just ramping and then emptying their hand and saying, okay, please cast a whole new world, let me refill, I have double your ink, and now I can do crazy things against you, has always been rough. But Steelsong players have gotten some more tools to let them go a little bit faster with Daisy. Even Prince Naveen helps them achieve that too, with him coming in and being able to rip a song right away. It's not as difficult for them to maintain a good pacing against Ruby Sapphire, which is what you need to do to go under that list.
It's really interesting because I think in the past you'd say Ruby Sapphire maybe had like a 70-30 edge, as significant as that, but maybe it's dialing back down to a 60-40 kind of split.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think that we're probably going to see iterations on this. I'm not sure if this is exactly how it's going to play out, but we're getting a little bit of shades of the Chicago opening set 4 meta, where Ruby Sapphire was very prominent in Chicago and then kind of fell off. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think Ruby Sapphire's additions of Tipo and Visions of the Future, giving them more consistent ramping and ability to find the cards they need when they need, improves the consistency of the deck, which is one of the issues that plagued it before, was sometimes losing to itself. I think those cards greatly improve that.
Yeah, Visions of the Future is a card that's really, really surprised me. I didn't have that picked out initially as one of the all-stars of Shimmering Skies, but holy cow, the consistency that that card brings to a deck is incredible. Being able to dig 5 cards deep and find the particular piece that you need in any given moment has been such a crazily good addition to that deck.
I think folks were maybe a little focused too much on seeing if Mufasa would work, which admittedly, the blue Mufasa is a fantastic looking card. He's probably going to find something somewhere, but the fact that we have a common in Visions and an uncommon in Tipo who are driving these red-blue lists to be better is crazy.
It's really funny that we pulled a foil Tipo the other night in our prize packs, and the foil Tipo is worth more than the 2 legendaries that we pulled combined. Combined.
Yeah, Tipo rocks. Maybe we'll see a big legendary Tipo someday. Maybe he'll have such a big impact, they'll have to give him a better card.
Floodborn Tipo, like Tipo full diaper.
Tipo fully grown and ready to go.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the top of the metagame. So we're seeing some developments for Steelsong. They're adding some new tools, maybe getting a little bit faster. We're seeing some developments from Ruby Sapphire getting a little bit more consistent. The other deck that you had kind of mentioned in that top tier was Ruby Amethyst. How are those lists developing?
So Ruby Amethyst, I'm gonna give a shout out to Kendall. No, I'm not. He has been winning a whole bunch of events lately with Ruby Amethyst, and his list is, I don't want to say this in a mean way, but very stock standard, very limited new cards. I think he's rotated between 0 to 2 counts of the library location as his only set 5 cards, which just goes to show the list is great. It's a very, very strong list. You have opening characters, you have tempo, and then you have the high-end removal with the ladies in chairs, and just the pressure of a be prepared into multiple locations being dropped. Some decks just can't handle that.
Yeah, and that's a great example of a player who has stuck on a deck and has completely mastered it. I mean, he's somebody who's played hundreds and thousands of games with that list, and so knows exactly how to pilot it in any given situation. So, you know, it's an old piece of advice, but it remains true. Practice makes perfect, and I feel like he can play that deck really perfectly.
But if you are looking at his list and you're saying, nothing's really changed, I want new cards, don't worry. There are other lists out there who are showing success in that ink pairing with new cards. Some of the new cards are, the new Elsa. The 5-cost Elsa comes in, exerts, has rush, evasive, very strong. Some lists are even leveraging then the Shift Elsa from set 1 to pair with her.
Love to see it. Huge Elsa fans in this household.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Some other cards that are flexing in and out, some of them are still running the Sisu package, both the evasive and the hand Sisu at the low end, and then the big Sisu for a sweeper. Madame Mim Elephant is seeing some play as well.
Yeah, love the elephant.
Love that card.
I love seeing some of these favorite cards making their way into these kind of stock lists, right? Developing them, keeping the metagame dynamic and exciting and interesting. I think the elephant has become a little bit underrated. I mean, that's a lot of butt to chew through.
Yeah, I'm frankly surprised that more lists are not running elephant when you're running purple, because elephant feels like a card that can help combat Steel Song. Just being like, oh, I have a whole bunch of health, and if you can't cleanly remove me, then I'm going to start pushing my damage back at you and just remove your guys. It just seems like a great card. And it bounces, so more rabbit bouncing. Okay.
So that makes up our kind of top tier, right? Let's look at that second bundle of decks, which is where all of our emerald decks seem to have landed.
All the vegetables, all the greenery.
Yes, the greenery. Well, we'll start with the one that I'm most comfortable with. That's the Amber Emerald Control Discard. Leading up into this set, myself and a few others were trying to figure out what new cards from Shimmering Skies we could include in this list to improve it. We were getting excited about certain things, different cards here, different cards there. And frankly, I don't think it needs it really. The list is very strong from set 4. You can add some new cards like the new Legendary Anna or the new Song You're Welcome. But generally speaking, the list hasn't really changed too much and is still kind of a staple. The only thing that really threatens it now is that in the Toronto non-Bucky meta, we saw it win the whole thing. And I think that was proof that it was the best deck in that format. But it's no longer the best deck in the format because other decks got better tools to combat it. Namely Pete. Steel Song was already a matchup that could be difficult when on the draw. You're both very song-focused decks, so it's all about, oh, can I land my singers and have them survive so I can sing with them the next turn? So as the discard control player, I would try to bounce or make the Steel Song player not have cards to play. And then the Steel Song player would then try to use their steel removal on my singers, like removing my Ariel to prevent me from singing a Bruno the next turn. So it's kind of a little back and forth. Typically who went first had the better leg, but Muses was also a very hard card for Steel Song to handle. But now they have Pete. So if they see us loading up with a board that, oh, okay, now we're going to Kita Under the Sea, they can say, hold on, we're going to pause, make you do nothing the next turn, or maybe I just play a character, and then they're going to whole new world us and find answers to remove all our singers and prevent it. So the list is still very strong. It's still a difficult list to master, but it's showing that it still has legs, and we'll see how far it goes at the Vegas Day 2.
Having been victimized by many a Prince John until you have forgotten me, I wouldn't be too upset to see that deck's meta share slide down a little bit. It's a really, really strong deck. It's also a deck that I think the skill expression really shines through. I have played against you playing that deck, and you have reps and you're a very strong player, and that can feel very, very difficult. And then I've played against some players who are picking it up for the first time, and they don't know some of the more powerful plays, and then I find it not so oppressive. So if you've picked up that deck, I think it's one that you need the practice with to really see it shine.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It has some odd wrinkles for a lot of cards that people may be familiar with, that you use them in different ways.
What else do we have on this list? Another vegetable.
Yes, more veggies. So we have the Emerald Amethyst. Now, interesting enough, there's actually kind of 2 wrinkles at the Vegas showing of these lists. There's one that is more hyper aggro. There are a few lists that run 16 1-drops and 24 2-drops.
Holy cow, very low to the ground.
Very low to the ground. Almost all these characters have 2 lore pips or some effect that makes them very hard to deal with.
I am also going to add links to all of these lists in our show notes. So if you're following along and want to see these lists for yourselves, just check the show notes.
And then the other flavor of the Emerald Amethyst is more kind of the traditional one that maybe if people are familiar with Artabax, his style of play, where it's a little more, I would say it used to be more tempo, but it's a little more mid-range now, with the top end being the big 7-cost Ursula and now the new big Clarabelle 7-cost. So the idea is, you're kind of going around, you're battling on the board, maybe your hand gets a little low and then you play Clarabelle and draw 3+ cards at the end of your turn.
A lot more staying power late into the game compared to the versions that used to run the Cursed Merfolks and the Flynns to play hard early.
So those are the two flavors of that list. Those lists are showing pretty good showing against a lot of different decks. One of the main cards that has kind of rotated back in that didn't see a lot of play last set in that ink pairing is Lyle Tiberius Rourke. The ability to reckless your opponent's character and then make them lose lore has given it staying power into some fast mirrors or against some lists that are just trying to go fast and also remove your guys.
Yeah, Lyle's been all over the place with the DLC coverage we've been watching. I mean, I think I heard it 10 times in the span of like 10 minutes today. It's crazy. It's definitely moving up the ranks a bit.
Shout out to my favorite puppy, Bonsai, from this new set. I love that card, and I think that's one that's made its way into a few lists. And I think that when I saw that card, I said pretty much immediately, like, that's exactly what Emerald Amethyst wants in a 2-drop.
It's pretty much the green Smee, and it's almost a direct upgrade over Merfolk. Yes, it comes in a turn later, but it just does arguably so much more.
It's resistant to Brawl. It trades cleanly with a Fox, trades up into a Fox, which is really, really nice. It's not quite as strong against some of the Steel decks because it does get hit by Let the Storm Rage On, but it's so good into so many other matchups and so good in so many other spots that it's been really impactful when I've seen it hit the board.
Is a hyena a puppy or is that a cat?
This is a very good question and one I don't have an answer for.
I'm just saying I was taken out when you said puppy, and I was like, it's not a puppy, but I guess maybe. Like a wolf?
I don't know. I feel like it's canine-esque, right? I don't know.
I don't know. We'll have to do our own research about that.
We're a snack podcast, not a pet podcast. And what's the last vegetable here? Now, this is the vegetable that I think maybe flew under the radar a little bit here. Maybe this is like the okra of the metagame. Okay. Tell us about Emerald Steel.
Sure. So to that point, I think that Emerald Steel kind of flew under the radar. I think a lot of people were kind of focused on, the big three, or they were focused on, I really want this Sapphire, Emerald, Clarabelle, super ramp, draw 10 cards in a turn list to work. People were kind of getting, maybe not lost in the sauce, but they weren't paying attention to one of the old reliables, the Emerald Steel. I guess you'd classify it kind of aggro discard. There's a little bit of mid-rangey lists out there, but we're talking about, Prince John, getting out Ursula Deceiver of All, double singing Sudden Chill, putting out, different cards like Muses, or playing Morph and then shifting to Tragic Hero Beast on turn 3, like strong stuff that most lists will struggle with.
Just a whole bunch of really good cards slammed together.
Yeah, this was a list that I had done some internal testing with a group that I run with, and it had won the in-house tournament. And we kind of all were keyed in on, there might be something here that's really strong that can run with the big dogs. And leading up to Vegas, I had said that I think this might be the list that could take the whole thing.
And we might see that shake out. As we're recording, Zach Bivens finished in first place with an Emerald Steel list, and there are some other strong players like Azan Syed is also on an Emerald Steel list. So we're going to see how that shakes out later today, and by the time you're listening to it, the results will have been made known, but we'll see how it shakes out. A high likelihood that Emerald Steel could be the big winner of Vegas. That covers the kind of major decks of the kind of first two tiers. You want to quickly touch on some of the other contenders that didn't see as much representation, but maybe have a chance in a set championship?
The first two lists I want to talk about are the Amethyst Steel and the Sapphire Steel lists. Both of them, showing a long history of being quality decks, making quality runs, but never maybe quite making it all the way. They kind of had a poor showing at Vegas in terms of making day 2. I don't think this is a indication that they're not good lists to follow. That is a style list that requires a little more of a solved meta to know, okay, I need smashes, not babooms. I need Chiempo, not Beast Tragic Hero. I need X card over Y card to combat what list I'm seeing. So I think Amethyst Steel will have a rough showing off the gate, which is what we're seeing, but I think it will come back strong. There's a lot of deck builders out there who are building good versions of the list. It just requires the pilots to get there.
It's a toolbox deck, and you need to know what tools you need for any given meta. And when you don't know what that meta is, you're not sure which ones to grab, which tools to grab.
Yeah, and I think Sapphire Steel suffers a little bit of the same fate to that, where they have a lot of different ways to answer things, but it's about what do I need to answer. So now that, we're getting much more data both from the Vegas and the Birmingham DLC this weekend, counting those two color pairings out will be a mistake. So I would still expect to see them. I would still know how to play against them, and I would still know how to build against them.
Seems like any deck that can run Pete is worthy of consideration. Steel's a pretty strong color because of that one card right now.
Speaking of Steel, there is a Ruby Steel list that made Vegas Day 2.
Wow.
Ooh, ah.
And it has Pete, but it also has Tiana.
Wow. Wouldn't expect that considering the kind of overlap in functionality.
I think they were just going for let's majorly lock down. And also, what is one of the issues that Ruby Steel has been plagued with outside of playing Whole New World? It typically is card draw. That is kind of a natural thing that Tiana can slot into is, I'm in top deck mode. Not by design, but now it's by choice. They're running Jim Hawkins with 2 types of locations in the Seven Dwarves Mine, the new location, and then RLS Legacy from when Jim Hawkins came out.
Yeah, the Seven Dwarfs Mine is a card that anytime you move a character there, you're able to ping one of your opponent's characters for 1 damage, and 2 if you move a knight character to that location.
And it's running 8 knights.
Perfect. Love that.
So it's Doc and Happy. The Happy is the 1-drop evasive on your turn. So, someone who can help combat maybe an enemy Diablo or another evasive threat. And Doc is the card that lets you do a little card draw. You play him, you discard your hand and draw 2 cards. And if Doc's the only card in your hand, well, then you just draw 2 cards. Pretty nice.
Not bad for a 2-drop.
Sounds like a really fun list. I hadn't heard about that list before. That sounds like a really good time. Tiana and RLS Legacy, that's crazy.
And Gustav the Giant.
Nice.
Wow.
There is some spice in this list, and I'm excited to see what this player can do in Day 2.
Absolutely. How about Amber Amethyst Aggro? How did that do in the DLCs?
Now, aggro and hyper aggro lists have shown in the North American DLCs that they normally do make a Day 2. A few of them make it. There's lists here and there and from Toronto, Texas, Atlanta. But it's always, the mark has always against them has been that they don't tend to get past round 1 in Day 2. I'm very hopeful about some of the lists we're seeing. There are kind of 3 different takes on the Amber Amethyst hyper aggro. There's one that's a little bit beefier with Madam Mim Elephant and Rapunzel to kind of play off each other.
Love that. That sounds very interesting and kind of atypical for those lists.
And then the other is kind of more of the very standard one, a lot of 1-drops, a lot of 2-drops. And then the other list is running the 1-drop Nala, the 0-4 Quest for 1. I wonder if they looked at, Daisy, a 1-4 Quest for 2 and said, why not more high willpower guys that I can just keep questing with?
Oh, a potential use for all of those promo Nalas that we've been getting.
Yes, exactly. Our beautiful foil promo Nalas that are just sitting in a binder right now.
The Nala list also has one of my favorite cards of all time. The Boss is on a Roll. It's just a great tool to give these hyper aggro lists the exact next few draws they need to help close out a game.
So that's a 3-cost song that lets you order the top 5 cards of your deck and also gives you a free lore for the trouble.
Yep, 1 lore. You can reorder the 5, or you can put any of those 5 to the bottom of your deck.
It's really cool to see some of the innovation coming to the forefront. And I think the last list that has made a little bit of an impact in this metagame is Blurple, or Amethyst Sapphire. How did Blurple do?
So they had one list make it to Day 2. It's a pretty, I don't want to say standard, but it's within the confines of what the kind of Sapphire Amethyst crew has been brewing. It's, get Tipo, get Mickey, get Donald. We're going to ramp like crazy. We have purple cards to help bounce and refill our hand. And then we have some real fun top end with things like, Yzma, the new Sapphire Cusco, Hades, Set 1 Elsa, because again, it makes sense to play Set 1 Elsa when you're playing the new Set 5 Elsa. and then some locations.
A really fun list. Maybe not one that's at the top of the metagame, but one that everybody should give a shot because there's so many fun cards that you get to play in the new Blurple lists. I love playing Elsa. I love playing Donald Duck. I love playing elephants. I think it's a really fun time for sure. What?
Oh my God, that's so gross. It looks like there's a bug in our food.
Oh my goodness. We're going to have to get this sorted out. Hold on 1 second, everybody.
Hey, Francois.
Oui, madame?
There's I think it's a bug in our food.
I apologize, madame. I'm very sorry. Let me take this away for you. I will be back in a moment.
That is shocking. Wow.
Madame and Monsieur, I would like to apologize again. We have, as I said previously, we have recently hired a new cook in their back room, and we believe he has been sabotaging the meals. He has been quickly dismissed. This should not be a problem in the future. I would like to apologize profusely for this scandalous behavior.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you, Francois. I'm glad to hear he's not going to be at the restaurant anymore.
You know what? This reminds me of something that happened at the DLCs this weekend. Did you hear about this, Pete?
Unfortunately, I did. It's something that, shouldn't be taken lightly, but there was a player who was caught at multiple rounds cheating and was issued a disqualification.
Really, really sad to hear this. It's something that, you never want to see in your game, especially, Lorcana has this reputation of being a more social game, of having players who are more welcoming, more inviting, and it's really unfortunate to know that this is happening at a major event like this.
It's kind of a shock that you have someone who shows that they can play at a high level, who then comes to another DLC and tries to skirt the rules to their advantage and take advantage of other players, which is a real bummer, because I think, like you said, this has been a very welcoming game. We're seeing a lot of different types of players play this, more than what I've seen in other TCGs or CCGs. First off, I'm glad that it was resolved to a good point during the DLC. There was a point that I was privy to where it was just going to be a series of warnings, and I'm glad that it was escalated correctly, that the head judges acted correctly from my point of view, and properly disqualified them. I hope that there is more to come out of this, that Ravensburger can take a strong stance and kind of make an example of this, that they don't stand for this, come down hard on somebody who is proven to be cheating, that it is taken care of, and that we know that we don't have to go to a DLC and sit there and go, oh, do I need to be watching like a hawk what my opponent's doing? We should be in a comfort level of knowing that we're playing in safe environments, both where we're playing, but also with our opponent too.
Definitely. It's certainly alarming when it's something that's subtle as, they've said that it's drawing extra cards at the beginning of your turn. It's something like that, like you said, that it's makes you a little more nervous when you're going into a DLC or even into set champs, right? If something like this can happen on a big stage when someone is being filmed, it makes you wonder what happens when someone's not being filmed and there aren't a million judges watching.
Yeah, I agree. I do hope that they take a very strong stance against this. And, you said make an example. I think I'm fine calling this making an example of this player because it was proven. I think, there's this repeated pattern of cheating. This was not a gray area, right? We know for a fact that across multiple rounds, this person was drawing extra cards at the starts of their turns. And so, I think I would like to see Ravensburger come down very hard and just issue a lifetime ban from competitive events to that person. I'm totally fine with that. I hope that is what happens.
And I want to urge anybody who's listening who is going to go to a DLC or any event, don't let this event spoil your enjoyment of the game. I think that this is a one-off. I think there are going to be people who take advantage, obviously, of any system they're put in. But I don't think that this environment has that type of player who is everywhere. I think I know that the people I play with, everybody I've played with at Chicago, around New Hampshire and around Massachusetts and other areas I've traveled with, they've all been stand-up players. They're looking to help remind you of triggers. You know, they all want to win correctly and the right way. And so that's been a good sign.
Definitely. I mean, we'll keep coming back to the Lorcana Cafe, even though there was one bug in our food. Okay, Brett, you have cooked up a beautiful dream card for us this week. Tell us what we're looking at.
So we have here a 6-cost inkable character named Shan Yu, Brutal Foe.
Ooh, spooky. We haven't seen him in Lorcana yet.
Yeah, one of the scariest villains in all of Disney canon. Shan Yu is a 7-strength, 5 willpower character. He's a storyborn villain. He quests for 2. And he has 2 abilities. The first is I'm Ready. This character can challenge ready characters.
Love it. The second ability is Avalanche. During your turn, when one of your characters is banished in a challenge, return this character to your hand.
And he has the flavor text, Bow to me.
Ooh, so spooky. That might be the spookiest flavor text since Woe to the one who draws his gaze.
Yeah, you love that. That's on the Beast Forbidden Recluse, the Recluse Beast, the Stone Gargoyle Beast. Pete, what do you think about Shan Yu?
Well, immediately when Katie said this was beautiful, I was getting the opposite reaction that it's terrifying. This artwork, this is a scary guy. I'm thinking back to Mulan. This guy was a force. So this looks like a card I would not want to see across the table. Much fitting how he was perceived in Mulan.
Yeah, so he's a very, very strong challenger, right? A huge body, 7'5". He can challenge ready characters. A little bit slow, which I think kind of captures maybe his like hulking presence. He's not a quick character. He's a very strong character. But then, of course, there is a bit of a drawback with that second ability.
Yeah, he certainly kind of bites you back. You can play him, he's very strong, but then if you have a bunch of other little dudes out in his army, he has to come back to your hand. Then that's not may return. You have to return him to your hand. So he's tricky.
Yeah, but what if you do something fun with Ruby? You put him out, rush him out with a Vitalosphere, kill a ready character, then another one of your guys banishes someone else, and you get to bounce him back to hand, and then you can ink him.
Yeah, you can try to mitigate that downside for sure. I think it'd be really fun. I think he captures hopefully what I was going for was he captures the general kind of aspect of his character, like he's a military leader and you have to organize your forces in such a way that you're not just throwing away your own characters needlessly, and you can play around that downside, but you have to use him tactically.
Nice. Well, this was a delicious mint, a great way to end our beautiful, harrowing at times meal here.
Another delightful evening. Well, I don't know, maybe more of a harrowing evening at the Lorcana Cafe, but you know what? We made it, and we feasted, we dined, we got through the other side. Pete, thanks for sticking with us here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, letting me show you the cookbook, and that mint was very tasty.
Yes, now we now have an autographed cookbook. Next on the menu, we do have a giveaway coming up.
Also, I heard that Off Meta Toby wants to share something with us, so I don't know. At this point, I feel obligated because he's always there, and if we don't, it would be awkward if we don't let him share whatever he's making.
Yes, we don't want Off Meta Toby to ever put a bug in our food, so we got to keep him on our good side. We'll talk to Toby, and then we'll talk about some last-minute Set Champs prep.
Looking forward to that. Keep on snacking, y'all.